It started with a quiet ripple, almost imperceptible at first, but in a city built on illusion and secrecy, whispers have a way of erupting into storms. Late one night, the usual hum of entertainment gossip exploded into a frenzy as obscure blogs posted cryptic headlines that set the industry alight. Dakota Johnson's private life exposed. Insider revelations, they claimed, hidden truths about the woman who had, for a decade, been shielded by impeccable discretion and an aura of untouchable elegance. And then, like a detonator thrown into the powder keg, Jamie Dornan's name appeared, an unmistakable figure drawn into a narrative he had never asked to inhabit, a man whose career, reputation, and family life now teetered in the spotlight alongside hers. At first glance, many assumed it was the typical Hollywood stunt, the kind orchestrated to attract clicks and revive fading headlines, but there was a subtle, unnerving authenticity to the leak that suggested otherwise. Fragments of messages, emails that had been buried for years, even pages from a personal journal had been meticulously pieced together, creating a mosaic of vulnerability that no publicist could spin or sanitize. The first wave of headlines screamed of betrayal and scandal, painting Dakota as someone living a double life, consumed by secret fears and forbidden attachments, and yet, hidden within the chaos of tabloid frenzy, was a detail that would alter public perception forever: Jamie Dornan. His name surfaced repeatedly, entwined with lines that read like confessions meant never to see the light of day, phrases that spoke of understanding, of emotional intimacy that transcended the confines of professional rapport, hints of a bond that had survived the intense scrutiny of cameras, scripts, and public expectation. Within hours, the reaction was electric. The internet ignited with divided fervor. Some fans celebrated, vindicated by suspicions long held, while others condemned the implication, accusing Dakota of violating boundaries, disrespecting a marriage, and dragging a reluctant man back into shadows from which he had spent years extricating himself. Across continents, Jamie Dornan awoke to a barrage of notifications, each ping of his phone an echo of chaos, managers, agents, friends, and family, each seeking answers he did not have, each demanding explanation in a situation that defied easy narrative. Amelia Warner, his wife, reportedly encountered the story not in private whispers, but on the morning news, a cruel synchrony that left personal betrayal and public spectacle inseparable. For Jamie, it was a recurrence of a nightmare he had thought resolved. Every career choice since the 50 Shades era had been a carefully measured step away from a role that had simultaneously defined and imprisoned him. Interviews were tactical performances of autonomy, film selections were exercises in reinvention, quiet retreats with his family were strategic shields against a fame that demanded he remain eternally accessible yet inviolable. And now, in a single, volatile night, all that painstaking reconstruction threatened collapse. Outside Dakota's Los Angeles residence, paparazzi formed a cordon, lenses trained on every movement, while in the UK, photographers pressed against Jamie's family home, every gesture magnified, every glance dissected. Headlines screamed accusations and insinuations. Amelia, understandably enraged, became an unwilling participant in a public drama she had never signed up for. Jamie, caught between duty, love, and personal integrity, teetered under the weight of choices imposed by circumstance rather than intent. Yet, as with any narrative that the public consumes voraciously, the truth beneath the surface was far more intricate than the tabloid simplifications suggested. Dakota Johnson had, from the outset of her career, cultivated a rare privacy, her public persona a blend of poise, humor, and calculated reserve. But the leaked materials revealed a dimension of her humanity rarely glimpsed: exhaustion, vulnerability, and the quiet desperation of someone struggling to remain herself under an unrelenting glare. One particular email, allegedly written in the wake of the final 50 Shades installment, offered a glimpse into this inner world. "People see only the fearless facade," she wrote, "but inside, I am fracturing, longing for genuine connection. For someone to see past the performative brilliance." The email concluded with a single, seismic line: Jamie was the only one who saw me, who understood what it meant to endure and remain intact. The dissemination of that line ignited a paradigm shift. Dakota was no longer merely a starlet. She became emblematic of human fragility exposed to relentless scrutiny, and Jamie Dornan, previously peripheral in public imagination, was recast as an intimate witness to that fragility. A man inextricably entwined in her narrative whether he sought it or not. Industry insiders began to speculate, spinning a web of theories. Had there always been something between them obscured by professional necessity? Had Jamie's measured distance over the years been a manifestation not of professionalism, but of unspoken accountability and suppressed connection? The most chilling fragment of the leaks hinted at an incident during 50 Shades Darker's production, a private moment in which Jamie allegedly comforted Dakota during an emotional breakdown. A night when a subtle shift altered the trajectory of their relationship. Though unverifiable, the mere suggestion reignited public imagination, with talk shows dissecting set photographs and tabloids reconstructing scenes frame by frame, searching for the elusive spark between them. Through all of this, Dakota remained silent, withdrawing entirely from social media, refusing statements, denials, or clarifications. Her silence became a drumbeat, intensifying speculation and giving momentum to narratives crafted by others. For Jamie, however, silence was a burden heavier than the headlines themselves. Friends recount his turmoil, a mix of anger at the invasion of privacy, protectiveness over Dakota's vulnerability, and the inescapable awareness of shared history invisible to the public eye, the late-night rehearsals, the emotional strain, and the enduring defense of one another against a world eager to misinterpret intimacy as scandal. By the week's end, he had ceased answering calls. The paparazzi caught him leaving his home with an ashen face, eyes shadowed with fatigue, and a single, charged sentence that defied interpretation. "There's more to this than people think." In that brief declaration lay the seeds of a new wave of speculation. If he did not deny it, was the absence of refutation and implicit confirmation? Across social media platforms, talk shows, and forums, fans and observers debated, dissected, and theorized. But the true secret, the one Dakota had guarded for years, remained hidden, known only to Jamie. Days unfolded in relentless repetition. New claims surfaced every hour, narratives multiplied, and the world converted Dakota Johnson's privacy into a theater of perpetual conflict. At the center of this maelstrom stood Jamie Dornan, reluctant, unprepared, yet undeniably pivotal, a figure caught between loyalty and exposure, between the intimate knowledge of truth and the relentless machinery of speculation. And then, unexpectedly, Dakota chose to speak, abandoning the carefully constructed channels of public relations in favor of raw, unfiltered honesty. Sitting before a single camera, devoid of makeup, devoid of the artifice of celebrity, her gaze held a quiet resolve, a weariness that spoke of years spent navigating a world that demanded perfection while erasing vulnerability. When asked about the leak, her nod was slight but resolute, signaling a willingness to disclose, but only on her terms, only in her voice. She revealed, with deliberate precision, that the leak was not born of betrayal or scandal, but of opportunism. A former assistant had exfiltrated private files with the intent of profiting, twisting context and chronology to fabricate narrative, to weaponize intimacy against her. And then came the pivotal revelation, the truth that reframed the chaos entirely. Jamie's name appeared not because of illicit romance, not because of impropriety, but because, at a singular point, he was the only person capable of seeing her completely, the only person who comprehended the human being beneath the persona, who offered solace without expectation, presence without performance. The emails, the alleged confessions, the fragments of journal entries were less about transgression than survival, a testament to the trust and understanding that had allowed her to endure the relentless glare of fame. That disclosure sent a ripple through public consciousness. Overnight, hashtags shifted from accusation to solidarity, criticism dissolved into empathy, and even the most sensationalized outlets offered retractions, a quiet acknowledgement of misrepresentation. Fans and commentators, previously invested in scandal, began to perceive the deeper narrative, not forbidden romance, not Hollywood intrigue, but the quiet heroism of loyalty, trust, and enduring human connection in the face of relentless scrutiny. Jamie's eventual, understated response in a brief television appearance confirmed the arc of integrity. He did not defend or sensationalize. He acknowledged bravery, honored shared experience, and reaffirmed respect. The world, confronted with sincerity over spectacle, paused, reconsidered, and slowly absorbed the true story, a narrative of survival, of empathy, of silent resilience. And yet, as the dust began to settle, one unspoken truth remained. Though Hollywood had momentarily shifted from gossip to admiration, the echoes of this revelation would linger, questions unresolved, tensions simmering. A story that was far from concluded. Across red carpets and film festivals, the briefest exchanges, the smallest gestures between Dakota and Jamie would continue to provoke speculation, interpretation, and awe, a subtle choreography of presence that spoke volumes to those who knew how to read it. It was not romance, nor scandal. It was the delicate, unspoken testament to human connection forged in adversity, the hidden currents that only those involved could truly perceive. And the world, insatiable and ravenous for the next chapter, would not rest until the next revelation surfaced, until the next truth, or the next misrepresentation, emerged from the shadows. But what happened in the moments between public appearances, in the quiet hours when the cameras were off, in the private exchanges and unrecorded gestures, remain the final, unclaimed territory of this unfolding story. The moment Dakota Johnson's quiet confession reached the public, a strange phenomenon began to unfold, a subtle shift in Hollywood's ecosystem that no one could have predicted, one that would ripple through careers, relationships, and reputations in ways that would be impossible to contain. While most eyes were fixated on the surface, the hashtags trending, the media corrections, the public's oscillating reactions, there was an undercurrent beneath it all, a tense, almost imperceptible energy that marked the collision of private truth and public spectacle. Dakota had spoken, yes, but the world was not accustomed to receiving honesty without embellishment, and so every gesture, every word, every pause became a battleground. The first thing people noticed was the absence of defensive fire from Jamie Dornan. He could have, in a single statement, obliterated months of speculation, but he did not. That omission, that refusal to weaponize denial, became its own story, a subtle but powerful declaration of agency. In Hollywood, where every silence is interrogated and every glance is analyzed, not speaking could be more revealing than the loudest confession. Analysts began to map the consequences almost immediately. Studios that had once been eager to cast Dakota or Jamie in leading roles now paused, calculating the risk of reputational entanglement versus artistic gain. Agents whispered in corridors, balancing their own ambitions against the potential fallout. And yet, there was a strange symmetry emerging. Those who had attempted to profit from scandal, bloggers, paparazzi, opportunistic journalists, found themselves exposed to scrutiny, their motives questioned, their credibility eroding faster than the stories they had constructed. In the days that followed, insiders revealed that the leak was no random act of malice. It was meticulously planned, executed by someone who understood not just Dakota's habits, but the intricate lattice of trust she had built around her life. The former assistant who had stolen the files was not merely opportunistic, they were strategic, calculating the exact moment when the public appetite for revelation was at its peak, knowing full well that the mention of Jamie's name would ignite decades of speculation and rekindle old obsessions. It was a lesson in power, in leverage, in the quiet ways in which information can be weaponized against even the most seemingly untouchable figures. Jamie, meanwhile, retreated further into the shadows, not out of avoidance, but out of necessity. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the narrative had the power to overwrite reality. One misinterpreted gesture, one candid photograph, could spiral into a headline that would define him, not for his talent or professionalism, but for a story over which he had little control. And yet, while he retreated, he was far from passive. Friends and confidants observed him working tirelessly behind the scenes, vetting legal channels, contacting journalists, negotiating boundaries, and subtly steering the conversation in ways that preserved both his integrity and Dakota's dignity. It was a masterclass in subtle influence, one that the public never saw, because the most consequential acts in Hollywood are often invisible. As the social media discourse raged, a more insidious layer of speculation began to emerge, one that delved not just into what had happened, but why it had happened, and what it meant for the future trajectories of both Dakota and Jamie. Some commentators suggested that Dakota's openness was part of a broader reclamation strategy, an attempt to reframe her narrative on her own terms before it could be hijacked by outside forces. Others proposed that Jamie's measured response was indicative of a man who had learned, through years of public misrepresentation, that the most powerful statement is often made in restraint. In parallel, insiders revealed that the stress had tangible consequences on their personal lives. Amelia Warner, caught unwillingly in this maelstrom, had to navigate not only the media glare, but the subtle pressures of trust, loyalty, and perception. Friends described tense conversations, private reckonings, and the delicate negotiations required to maintain stability in a world that thrives on instability. The leaks had exposed not just Dakota's private struggles, but the intricate lattice of human relationships that surround celebrity loyalty, protection, guilt, and the quiet sacrifices made to shield others from harm. And then came the photographs, those fleeting moments captured by lenses that never sleep, images that would be dissected endlessly by online sleuths. There was the shot of Dakota leaving a boutique, a casual glance over her shoulder, her expression unreadable, but interpreted by millions as a silent acknowledgement of guilt. There was Jamie leaving a film set, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes shadowed, and the world instantly concocted narratives. He was remorseful, conflicted, secretly yearning, or silently defending her. Each photograph, each fragment of movement, became a puzzle piece in a larger story that neither of them could fully control, yet each of them influenced in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Within this chaos, the dynamics of power became starkly apparent. Dakota, once the subject of external narrative construction, began asserting agency, not through confrontation, but through carefully measured presence, selective communication, and a strategic, almost imperceptible shaping of public perception. Jamie, on the other hand, demonstrated the power of restraint, showing that influence is not always loud, that protecting someone's narrative can be a form of authority in its own right. It was a silent chess game, one played across headlines, social media threads, and behind-the-scenes conversations, where every move carried both immediate consequences and long-term implications. Meanwhile, the emotional toll on Dakota was profound. Interviews revealed a depth of exhaustion and resilience that few outside her inner circle had witnessed. She spoke of years spent under a microscope, of navigating objectification, of being constantly reduced to surface-level narratives while grappling with the raw complexities of her own humanity. The public, accustomed to glamour and polish, struggled to reconcile this vulnerability with the image they had long consumed. Jamie, in turn, became an anchor, a stabilizing presence in a world determined to distort, misrepresent, and exploit. Their connection, forged in the intensity of shared experience, became a case study in the quiet power of trust and mutual respect. And yet, the storm was far from over. New leaks emerged sporadically, each seemingly innocuous fragment carefully curated to provoke speculation. An old text message, a note scribbled on set, a reference to a shared joke or private moment. Analysts and fans alike pounced on these fragments, constructing narratives that alternately romanticized, vilified, and mystified. Each revelation, real or fabricated, served to heighten curiosity, tension, and the stakes of public perception. In the midst of this, the media's hunger for drama revealed its own mechanics. Journalists vied not for clarity, but for the story that would generate clicks, headlines, and virality. In doing so, they inadvertently illuminated the contours of trust, betrayal, and loyalty that underpinned Dakota and Jamie's experience. Every misinterpretation became a mirror, reflecting society's obsession with intimacy, scandal, and the commodification of vulnerability. By now, the question at the heart of the saga had shifted subtly but unmistakably. It was no longer simply what happened between Dakota and Jamie, but rather who controls the story, who holds power in its telling, and what are the long-term consequences of exposure in a world that never forgets. In private, those closest to them understood the stakes far more acutely. Every statement, every public appearance, every photograph carried weight. Relationships outside the immediate circle were affected, alliances tested, loyalties measured. It became evident that Hollywood is not merely a place of fame and fortune. It is a complex ecosystem in which perception, timing, and narrative control are as potent as any performance on screen. And through it all, Dakota's silence remained deliberate, a strategic assertion of her own authority. Her decision to speak selectively, to reveal only certain truths while withholding others, created a tension that the public both craved and feared, a subtle mastery of narrative in a domain usually dominated by sensationalism. Jamie's measured, almost imperceptible intervention